Welcome, everybody. Here we are at the Freedom Hub Working Group. We've got a great guest here lined up today. Just so you know, we do record and log all of these. This is not only available as a podcast, but also as a recording itself. And for the visual recordings, you're going to want to go to our site for those, which is bit.ly/, and then definitely all capital letters, FHWG for Freedom Hub Working Group, FHWG Channel, CHANNEL. And the whole program is sponsored by Your Freedom Hub, which is really the disruptive entity out there right now for both healthcare and wealth care. So definitely take a look at that, yourfreedomhub.com. All right, so tonight we got a great guest today, which is Dan Fishman. He's the brand new executive director at the Libertarian Party. And for those that are not in the know, and he'll tell us a little bit more, but it is effectively the third largest political party in the United States. And on that note, I was going to have Charles Frohman, my guest host, allow you to hear some details about him, and then we'll give him the floor.
Thanks, Jeff, and welcome, Dan. And Dan really is a good new executive for the third largest party because he put his money where his mouth is and ran for office as state auditor in Massachusetts, where he is from, and got a major media endorsement from the Boston Globe. So he has statewide elective experience, so he kind of knows the good and the bad about running as a third party libertarian. And also as a new executive, he has a long background in the commercial space with business processes and technology. So he really knows how to run an organization, and he's got the ideology and some effectiveness results with that major media endorsement. So that's our guest for today, Jeff, and he's going to tell us about why it's important for any libertarian to keep the LP in their back pocket as a strategy that you can't just ignore. People have a love-hate relationship with this whole thing, but it is growing in force every year, and it's time to take it a little bit more seriously, Jeff.
Okay, very good. And it is pretty exciting because realistically, you know, the party's been around for quite a while, and it's gone from strength to strength. And, you know, as this country's become more polarized, the timeliness of it has been great. So it's kind of been waiting in the wings in certain respects. So Dan, on that note, I've stopped sharing and I'm giving you the sharing controls.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the endorsement. I've known Charles for quite a while. We worked together on the Johnson Weld campaign back in 2016, where I was the Northeast director. I was going to talk a little bit about my path to becoming very active in the Libertarian Party. I've been a dues-paying member for years. 2011, when Barack Obama passed the National Defense Authorization Act, he said that under suspicion of terrorism, the government can take you out of your house, bring you downtown for questioning, hold you without right to an attorney or without the right to a speedy trial, all of which are violations of the Constitution, and go to my family's personal history. My great-grandmother came home one day with her 5 daughters, and her husband was gone. She asked the neighbors what happened, and they said, oh, the police came and got him. They went down to the police station. The police was like, yeah, we don't know where he is. And so he was just gone. He was vanished by the police. So they decided that they would leave and they would come to the United States where it was safer. So when I heard that the United States suddenly had changed the law and said, oh yeah, the police can now just come and take you, I said, I have to do something. So I decided I would run for office. So I ran for Congress in 2012. And that was the first time I'd ever run for anything. But I learned a lot of things in doing that. So I was lucky at the time. So Massachusetts, where I lived, our politics is different than everywhere else. You think you know what Democrats are. You think you know what a one-party state is. But in Massachusetts, the Republican that I was running against was an out married gay man who was pro-choice. And the Democrat was on record as being pro-life personally. He was a hardcore Catholic. And his wife had gone to jail for money laundering for 30 days, which is sort of a badge of honor in Massachusetts politics. So Republicans thought they were going to get a seat. It ended up being the most expensive race in the country that cycle. $4.5 million went in there. And immediately it was very, the campaign had a lot of animosity in it. Both the Republican and the Democrat took out attack websites on each other. And the first debate that was scheduled was the Democrat John Tierney scheduled it. He scheduled it during the Republican convention. So naturally, the Republican didn't go. But to make it look legitimate, he invited me. So I went. So it was at a senior center debating Medicaid. And I, of course, I'm not a federal official. I don't know that much about it. I'm studying like crazy. And so I get there to the debate, incredibly nervous. And I find out that I know more about Medicaid and more about the law than a sitting congressman based on 2 weeks of study. So that disposed of me, any idea that, we don't belong here. We don't get to do this. And by all accounts, I did a good job in the debate. And then I got invited to another debate that had the same sort of style, except this time it was on Fox. And the Republican hosted it and the Democrat refused to show. So they invited me to legitimize the debate. And at one point in time, they asked me, they said, well, Mr. Fishman, what do you think about this as a third-party candidate when you see the websites that are attacking the other candidates? I said, well, one of the problems with being a smaller third party is that I had to take out a website attacking myself. All those doctored photos up there, I had to make them myself, et cetera, et cetera. So we got a big laugh. And I was invited to every debate after that. And the nice thing about it was, by all accounts, every press account of the debate started off with the first paragraph. Fishman was obviously the most informed and the best candidate at the debate. Now let's go on to the old party candidates. They didn't say old party. But so I won every debate. What does that mean in Massachusetts? What does that mean anywhere? 4.5%. However, I was the margin of victory. And so I got that great libertarian title of spoiler. A lot of Republicans hated me, but a lot of Republicans said, oh, we wish you were our candidate. We wish that our candidate was as fiscally pure as you are. Pure schmure. But, so I ran a few other times, and then I became political director in Massachusetts. And then last year, in 2018, actually in 2017, I decided that I would run for auditor in the state of Massachusetts. Auditor is a natural position for a libertarian. We had a great campaign slogan: why would you elect a Republican or a Democrat to audit Republicans and Democrats? That went over very well. We had a TV commercial that actually won a prize as the best political commercial in the cycle. I'll describe it briefly. It comes in, it's a tight close-up on a guy's shirt. It says #1 Colts fan. And then it zooms out and the guy puts on a referee's jersey. And then he walks out onto Foxborough Stadium. He picks up a football and says, "Stop the game. These balls are underinflated." And I say, that's not right. Republicans and Democrats have been playing political football with our taxpayer money, and the auditor is supposed to be the referee. And the referee shouldn't be wearing a jersey of one of the two teams. So that was great. We got a lot of coverage. And then, the craziest thing, we got the endorsement of the Boston Globe. In fact, the Worcester Gazette Telegram, too. All the biggest papers in Massachusetts endorsed me. In August, the company that I was working for, and I'm a software engineer by trade, but that company had been bought twice over the course of the time that I was there. It got bought in 2016, got bought again in 2017. The company that bought us was a pre-IPO company, and they said to me in not so many words, "Dan, you're really old and you make a lot of money. And so we'd like you to stop working here so it'll be better for our IPO." And I said, "Oh, that's great," because I could run full time. And I knew that as a software engineer, I could always go back to work. No, it wasn't a big deal. So in August, I took a severance and I campaigned full time from August all the way through to the end of November. A week before the election, I was speaking to League of Women Voters in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is Democrats squared. I give them my speech. Why would you elect a Republican or a Democrat to audit Republicans and Democrats? I talk about the scandals the auditors had. Talk about how, as a computer scientist, I'm going to put all the state's financials transactions online real time. And at the end, I see the heads nodding. I can tell that I'm reaching the crowd. And at the end, a woman stands up. She said, "Dan, I like everything that you had to say. I think you'd be an amazing auditor. But the party has told me that if I do not vote blue all the way down the line, that shows weakness in the Democratic Party. And that allows Donald Trump to build the wall. And I cannot have that." And I'm like, oh no. And then people stood up and started clapping in the room. And I realized that we are so polarized now that the old parties they understand now that instead of running a new positive marketing campaign for each candidate as it comes along, they can run a negative campaign based on fear and run that constantly. If you don't vote for the Republican candidate, if a Democrat gets elected into this seat, you're going to lose all of your freedom. You won't be able to start a business anymore. Your tax rate will go to 90%. Or if a Democrat gets elected into this position, if a Republican doesn't get elected into this position, it's going to be free health care and all these terrible things. Your phone cards will be demagnetized and the milk in your refrigerator will curdle. Whatever it is, they're selling fear, and that's what they run on right now. And it's working. We're so polarized. It's never been, I think it's never been this bad, at least maybe not since 1860. So, and it's deliberate too. That's the thing about 1860 is that it wasn't the parties trying to rip the country apart. But now that's exactly what the parties are trying to do, because they recognize in our voting system, our plurality voting system, first past the post, if you can break all the other groups up into smaller groups than you win the election. Even if your group is only 20% of the electorate, if everybody else's group is 10%, you win. So anything you can do to fracture the electorate, you want to do. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are corporations. They do marketing, they do research. They figure out what they have to do to win. They are corporations that sell elections. And they understand that the best way for them to win, the best way for them to deliver elections to their clients who pay them, which are elected officials, is to fracture the electorate and then be able to harness the largest groups so that they can win. So when I had that epiphany, this was November, the election came. I got 108,000 votes, which was, a really big number. I did better than anybody else in a three-way race, at least east of Mississippi. I think in Texas, there are some big states where people did better. But it was a nice experience, but we lost 4.5%. That's my number in Massachusetts, no matter what. Even though I was endorsed by the Globe, even though we ran full time, all that other stuff. And I was disheartened. And then I saw the position for executive director open up. And I thought, I can do that. I can help the party get better at messaging. I can help us get better in our professionalism. And so I talked it over with my wife. And I said, I would like to go and take this job. And my wife had been retired at the time. And I said, if we go take this, it's a change in lifestyle for us. You will have to go back to work. And things are going to change. We're not going to be Boston software engineers anymore. We're going to be, working for essentially in politics. And she said, all right, let's go do it. So I applied for the job. I got it at the end of March, and April 15th, I moved down here. And now being in the office, seeing what we're doing, I couldn't be prouder to be a libertarian. I couldn't be prouder of my peers and the people that I work with. But I think that there's a lot of stuff in terms of process that we can do better. And so I want to show a couple of things that we've been doing recently that I think are making a big difference. One of them is, what does it mean to be a libertarian right now? It's varied. You're going to get 25, 30 definitions from different people. I was recently in a huge argument on Facebook, because that's a profitable use of my time, where I said, okay, I was talking to a guy who insisted that libertarians support the death penalty. Now, we have some controversial opinions between ourselves, but I would say that 99.999% of libertarians would agree we do not support the death penalty. But this guy insisted, no, libertarians support the death penalty. He pulled out a Rothbard article about it saying why, et cetera. And I'm just like, our messaging is off here. We need to focus on the things that we really believe in and make sure that people understand who we are. And we're working against the fact that the two greatest marketing machines in history, right, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and all respect to, Coke and Pepsi and Ford and Chevy, but the Republicans and the Democrats, those guys really understand how people think. And they have been going against each other tooth and nail for a long time. And they have messaging that is designed to make sure that they always win. And they attack each other, and they'll attack anybody who gets in their way. And in fact, the one thing that Republicans and Democrats agree upon the most is that they don't want to see libertarians ever win an election, because they don't want there to be a third part, because it changes all these formulas that they've worked out. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make it so that we're going to win more elections, that we're going to make it so that our views are getting heard, because we have, in addition to, you know, a great brand, we have intersectionality with every American. Okay, the Democrats have stolen that word, intersectionality, but it doesn't belong to them. Real intersectionality is when you have something in common with somebody, and everybody has an experience where the government has, through overreach, impacted their lives in a negative way. And when we talk about that, that's the thing that unifies us. And rather than in the past, we spent a lot of time focusing on, well, these are the things that you have to agree upon to be a libertarian. You have to agree on guns, and you have to agree on all these other controversial issues. But that's not really true. We have to find the one thing that we do agree upon and say, you know what? I support your liberty. I support your liberty. And it's a simple thing for us to say. And when we do that, we enhance the party, and we get people to say, you know what? I support your liberty too, because that's natural human interaction. If you're nice to somebody else, they're going to be nice to you. If we can find a way to tell people that we support their liberty doing something, they're going to say, well, I should support this person's liberty. And that's what tolerance is. Tolerance is the idea that your approval has nothing to do with somebody else's lifestyle. Tolerance is accepting that people can do what they want, regardless of what you think, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. I got a lot of mileage with this in Massachusetts when I would say, so tell me, do you think you're tolerant? I would normally say this to Democrats, because that's mostly what was around, and they were the most fun to troll. And I would say, do you think you're tolerant? They'd say, of course I'm tolerant. I supported same-sex marriage for forever. And I'm like, oh, we know everybody in Massachusetts supports same-sex marriage, so I wouldn't call that tolerant. But do you support a person's right to bear arms? I'm like, well, because that's tolerance, right? I mean, if they're not hurting anybody, oh, no, but they could. I'm like, but they're not hurting anybody. You know, the libertarian arguments along the way. And sometimes some people would start to think about that. You're like, you're right. I have been intolerant. That's how we win. So I'm going to show a couple of graphs along the way. If my screen is sharing, is up now. You guys can tell me if you can see it. Yes? No?
Yes.
All right. So let me actually start with this PDF. So this is where we've been going for the last 20 years. And those of you who have seen trend lines, this is bad. Our trend line, and something happened in 2000. There was a thing that the National Party did called Project Archimedes, where they spent a tremendous amount of money to get a lot of members. And so membership was high, active donors were high, but we didn't do anything to retain them, and it plummeted. And you can see that actually in the course of 6 years, membership had fallen by 50%. And it kind of came up, but then it sort of flattened out, and then it trended down again. 2016, that's the presidential year, Gary and Bill, they brought in a lot of people. If you were to look at this as a percentage increase in the last 20 years, that's the largest percentage increase we ever had. Then it dropped off, but we sort of stayed flat for 2017 and 2018. But if you scroll down here, and let me see if I can blow this one up a little bit more. So this is active donor in the last 24 months. And you can see that we sort of, run around a little bit. But then if you look at these last 3 months, and so here I come in April, really sort of getting my feet wet. But then we start our plan of trying to recruit more people. And so now let me bring in one more close-up of this. So this is a count of our active members based on chart. And you can see that our trend line since July has been really good. And that's what we want to do. And so we are trying to do these things through various forms of success. So I can stop sharing the screen now. And so one of the things we've done is we are encouraging people who are spreading the liberty message to become referrals. If you have a podcast, hint, hint, guys, lp.org/referral. Sign up, and every time that you say, hey, you guys who are listening, you should join the Libertarian Party, if somebody does that, we'll pay you a commission for bringing them to liberty. And so we are growing the party very rapidly now in ways that we haven't. And we have a lot of liberty podcasters. And the liberty movement has been in the past a lot broader than the Libertarian Party. We want to change that. We want the party to bring all the liberty people in. And rather than us saying, oh, the Libertarian Party is just for board gamers, or the Libertarian Party is just for gun nuts, or just for whatever your pet issue might be, we want the Libertarian Party to be diverse. And that means that anybody who's got a liberty-based podcast, they should be recruiting for people to join the Libertarian Party, because we have a representative LNC. People get elected. Our party, when we work together, we elect libertarians. And generally, as much as you disagree with another libertarian, if they were elected to office, you'd be pretty psyched, because they're not going to impact you with any of their opinions, because libertarians don't do that. So as we start to bring the liberty movement together, centered around the Libertarian Party, which is the only political wing of the liberty movement in the country, as we start to bring those people together, we are really starting to grow in strength. And 2020 is going to be a remarkable year for us. In addition to the fact that, the Republicans are running I will say a damaged candidate. He's going to get bruised pretty badly in the impeachment. I don't think the Senate will impeach him, although I don't think it's impossible either. But most likely Trump will come through, Senate will clear him, but he'll have that looming over his head. And then the Democrats, they couldn't be more fractured. There was a wonderful meme that was published the other day and said, Shea resurrected, announces candidacy for 2020 as a Democrat, immediately called too moderate. The progressives and the moderates are just ripping the party apart right now with no mercy, and I don't see them unifying. I saw Kamala Harris dropped out along with two people who I'd never heard of, one Sleestack and the former governor of Montana. But the Democrats' race is going to end up with a lot of very unhappy Democrats, just like what happened when Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders ran. And in many ways, it's probably going to be the same thing. I suspect that Sanders is going to get bumped out, and his fanatical supporters are going to say, geez, the Democratic Party is not where we belong. Who are the people who are the most socially accepting of liberty that we can support? It's going to be the libertarians. So I like what we can do in 2020. I think we're going to have a bunch of good candidates running. I think that our message, as we refine it, and instead of it all being about anything in particular, it's about, I agree with you exercising your liberty. That's our number one message. We want you to be able to exercise your liberty. And we want everybody to say that. That's the simple thing about it. And that's a clear-cut message. Rather than it saying, we support LGBT rights. Well, of course we do. Support gun rights. Of course we do. Cannabis, of course. Sports gambling, of course. We support all of these things. Excuse me. But it's so broad that if we say, we support all of these things, our message is diluted. But if the message is very simple, I support you having your liberty, that's much more cut and dry. And we don't make enemies anymore, which is what we've done in the past. We have, at times, really fallen apart and devolved into arguing, which we shouldn't be doing. As libertarians, a Libertarian Debate Club, we've all done it, talk about these really esoteric issues of liberty, of, what happened if there was unlimited energy, but all these crazy libertarian thoughts. Stuff like that doesn't get us anywhere. Living in the world, the real practical world, and talking about what we can do in ways that we can support everybody's liberty. Whatever you want to do. You want to start a business? I support your liberty. You want to drive Uber? I support your liberty. You want to shoot heroin? I really wish you wouldn't. But I'm not going to throw you in jail. I'm not going to separate you from your child I support you exercising your liberty and hope that I can convince you to make better choices. And this is the message that we have to get out. That simple thing. We support people's liberty. And then, an extension of that is that when you tell people that you support their liberty, you're telling them that you care for them, which is true. We do. Libertarianism is the political expression of loving your neighbor, because you want them to have the thing that is most important to you. You want them to have the same liberty that you have. And libertarians don't fight for liberty for themselves. I mean, we get that as a byproduct, but invariably, libertarians are on the front line fighting for the liberty rights of other people. And there couldn't be anything that's more selfless than that. When we fight for when we talk about anti-war, of course, we're against violence. Of course, we're against the idea of, a draft, that the government can take a kid out of their home and send them to fight overseas. Of course, we're against using aggression for political means. But we're fighting for it because it's about individual liberty. It's about you not having to do any of those things. Because chances are, I'm not going to get drafted at this point. That would be a pretty terrible situation if they want 52-year-old guys with bad eyes. But when we fight, when we talk about anti-war, we're doing that because we care about other people. And it's not that we don't want, this is the thing that sometimes I like to have conversations where people say, oh, but you know what? Who's going to build the roads or the schools or anything like that? Libertarians don't hate the roads. We don't hate schools. We don't want those things to go away. The only thing that we hate is that we want when people's liberty is suppressed. And if somebody forces you to pay taxes, they are taking money from you. That is suppressing your liberty. So if we can find a way to have schools and roads and hospitals and whatever else that aren't paid for by money that's taken by force, great. Let's do those things. Libertarians want a better society. We want us all to have the ultimate gift to be able to enjoy a society of liberty. As we work towards that messaging and we get it better, we're going to grow the party more. And hopefully this is the year that we really disrupt American politics. And so I feel like I monologued here a little bit. So let me let you guys jump in if there are any questions.
Well, Dan, that was quite good, I have to say. It's true, though. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that 1860 election year, because I remember it like it was yesterday. So, but what I've always said, with the libertarians, because it used to almost be a litmus test of the caliber of how smart or up to speed you were. And if you had read the last 50 most important libertarian books, and there was a quiz on Thursday. And I always said, the day that the salespeople show up, the rest of the world better watch out, because this party's going to make some serious stuff happen. And that's gradually what's begun to happen. And although, truthfully, we really all like and appreciate what you said, but I have to tell you, we really love your wife for allowing the two of you to be able to go there and make some good things happen. Because, without her buy-in, you were going to have an uphill battle for sure. So that's fantastic. So we appreciate that. But that's really what it's about. It's the stealthiness of it. It's getting to that simplicity of explaining to your buyer, your consumer, because it is a product, really.
Very much so.
That way. I mean, it is a philosophy, but to regular people, it's a product. I mean, what have you done for me lately? What's in it for me? How's this going to be good for me?
And that's very much one of the things that I think I have brought in that's a little bit of a different way of looking at it, is that having come from industry, I think about what we're doing right now as customer acquisition. And so we have to really be smart about what we're doing. Companies don't succeed if they just throw their product out there and see what's going to happen. We need to know beforehand when we put messaging out there, are we putting out the right messaging right now? Because what we have is awesome. Our product is amazing. And if we can get people to sample liberty, they're going to like it and they're going to stay with us. But we have to make sure that the sales pitch really is good. Your point is exactly right. So we have to acquire the customers. And once we do that, we have to be willing to retain them, do what's involved in that. But understanding that we're acquiring customers and thinking about it from a professional manner rather than from a purely political manner, I think gets us a lot further.
Well, sure. Oftentimes it's quite negative, and really it's all about emotion in the end for everybody. As much as you try to be analytical and think you think in that respect, it's really from your heart where you typically think. And the
Right.
fact that we are really all about caring and not controlling is really the strongest message of all, because both the other parties represent some mentality of controlling
Absolutely.
both your life and your money and everything else for that matter. And of
Yeah.
course, as we all know, that is the ultimate fatal conceit. And so if we just realize, look, as long as you're doing what you want to do and you're not bothering anybody else, and lo and behold, other people think what you're doing, like I'll tell everybody, if whatever you do is great until the day people can't or give you money to do it, and that
Right.
could be prostitution or any kind of crazy thing you think of, you know what? It's not a business anymore. It's time
Right.
for it to end, and you just move on and do some other different business. So
Right.
that was really great, Dan. And so yeah, the message is really great. And the timeliness is fantastic. It's really it almost needed. And I've sadly have already told this because I've done a lot with friends and people overseas for many years because of different outside activities that I've had going on. And lo and behold, in America, we are totally wait until the you know what hits the fan kind of a country until
Yep.
my family has that problem or the neighbor, then I don't really pay attention to any of the fact that they're locking everybody and his brother up. I don't care about that.
Right.
But in those other countries, it's so small and everybody's so integrated with each other. Every other country's situation impinges on ours.
Yeah. There's a great
So our timing
meme
is
that,
great.
okay. I was going to say,
Go
there's a
ahead.
great meme that I love where it says, a tyrant doesn't ask for power over you. He asks for power over your neighbor.
Yeah, ooh, that's an excellent one. All right, well, we've got some hands up of sure, so this is great. All right, David, I see that you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Jeff. Dan, from your perspective as executive director, what does the LP and the Libertarian National Committee and paid staff need to do to change the political equation to better leverage free market successes like cash basis healthcare and homeschooling so we can win more elections?
I think one of the critical things we do, and so, Jeff, I don't know if you were cueing me there when you mentioned the fatal conceit, but that is my favorite Hayek book. And I talk about that more, and I think that's how we clue people into the real strength of the market. And for those of you who haven't read Hayek's Fatal Conceit, essentially what he says is look at this amazing world that we live in. Those you can see, I have a mandarin orange right here in the heart of winter. That was brought to me by free markets and capitalism. I have a cell phone in my pocket. I have a coffee cup that keeps my coffee warm. Amazing space technology. All these things happened because somebody said, if I can find a way to provide a service to society, society will pay me. And so you have all these people competing to provide services, which is awesome. That's what we want. And in that process, a lot of those people fail. And that's awesome too, because it means that the successful ones are really good because they had to come out through this cauldron of competition. We used to say in software, the strongest iron is forged in the hottest fire. When all these different companies are competing in a truly free market, it benefits the consumer so much. And so when we look at healthcare, we can see that. That's a pretty easy one where we understand how the government is ruining things. But a lot of times when we talk about schools, people are like, oh, but if we don't have schools for everybody, how bad is it going to be? And the answer is schools can be pretty bad right now. And because there's no free market for school, or not really a free market for school, people are trapped into whatever is the school system that's being provided to them. If we had an actual free market for education, there would be a lot better schooling going on right now because people would be working to make results. People would be trying to educate your kids. Why does the school system try? And so I say this, I'm a former teacher. I was a special education teacher for 7 years. My motivation for teaching was honorable. I really wanted my students to succeed. I mean, I worked in a severe autistic population. My kids were never going to go out and hold down 9-to-5 jobs, but I wanted them to have good lives. And all teachers that I knew, actually, that's not true. I want to say most teachers that I knew wanted the best for their kids. But sometimes you would get teachers who were teaching out a pension. In Massachusetts, you get your pension after 20 years, and it's 80% of what your salary was. And so there's a lot of teachers who, after 10 years, made the realization, you know what? I hate teaching. But if I can just do it for 10 more years, I get a pension at the end, and I'm good to go. So for 10 years, the teacher has to go through a job that's terrible, that they don't like. So that's bad for them. All the students have a teacher who doesn't like their job. That's bad for them. And the school district is missing the opportunity to hire another teacher who might be much better, who would love their job, because they can't replace this teacher who's teaching out their job. Government made that. Government made that through offering pensions to teachers. And one of the very simple things we can do, and this is an easy way to talk about how the market would be better as a way to fix education, is instead of having government paid pensions, what if every teacher had a 401k that they controlled? You know, companies all the time put money in a 401k. Let them have their own portable retirement plan. So if after 10 years they decide, you know what, I hate teaching, they leave. They leave the industry. That's good for everybody. If we have smaller competing schools, and you see this, the rise in homeschooling is remarkable, and I find it very encouraging. And what's really interesting for me is that, so I've been in Boston for 25 years. Before that, I lived in Texas. Homeschooling in Texas is very different from homeschooling in Massachusetts, but it's awesome. Viva la différence. That's what we want. We want these different competing models. Homeschooling in Massachusetts is very, it's cooperative. You see large groups of parents coming together and essentially forming a school, and different people teach different classes at different times. But, you know, they take advantage of all the natural resources and they do what they're doing. Homeschooling in Texas, when I was there, and granted this is 25 years ago, it was a lot more family-based. It wasn't as much cooperative learning, but that's what they wanted to do, and that's great. Allowing homeschooling to rise, private schools to rise, competition in the market, that's going to be good for education. There's nothing that we can point to that we can't say, every time there's competition, it gets better. Every time the market is truly free, it gets better. So all we have to do, or all the LP and all the LNC and all the candidates have to do, is make sure that we're always talking about how the markets always produce what's best for everybody. You know, we talk about what exists right now in the United States. Something that's on my mind, and it's probably on everybody's mind, at least everybody who's over the age of 20. Just home for Thanksgiving, I was talking with my nephews, and they have a 75-inch television on their wall, and it's crazy big. And I'm like, well, how'd you guys get this? And they're like, oh, we bought it with the money we earned over a summer job. And I should say that my eldest nephew is just, he's a crazy hard worker. He worked several jobs over the summer, including being a lifeguard, saved up a lot of money, bought himself a giant TV. But if you look at that, for me, I'm old enough that I remember black and white televisions. And then I remember, you know, getting the first color television, and then slightly bigger televisions, and then really small flat screen televisions. But now we're so wealthy, kids have their own giant flat screen TVs, things that were the height of luxury 10 years ago, because it wasn't centrally planned, right? It was everybody and their uncle in electronics trying to figure out how to make a cheaper, better, lighter weight, but bigger flat screen TV. That's what the market does. And if it can do it in something as complicated as making a television, right? Like, there are a lot of things I say, oh, you know what? I know how to do that. I know how to do that. I cannot make a television. So we're talking about something that's really complicated, and the market has crushed it. They completely know how to do it. They know how to make it efficient. So something that's service-oriented, like healthcare or education, if we unleash the power of the market on that, the market's going to crush that too. So we get a long way. And again, and free market is also always about liberty. So, you know, this thing I talked about, the unifying message of us, we want you to have as much liberty as you can. That means your freedom to act however you want in the market. So right now, most of what government does, or a lot of what government does, is erect barriers to entry so that people don't have an ability to compete in a truly free market. Austin, where we're going to have our convention, if people haven't bought their tickets yet, libertarianconvention.org. Get them now. But Austin, we're going to have Austin banned Uber, right? How crazy is that? But why do they do it? Because the taxi industry had been paying government for years so that they would buy their medallions. It was a source of revenue. The government controlled it and gave them protection for it. Look at anything else that's out there, right? This whole scandal with the EpiPen, right? It was $500, when in reality, the amount of epinephrine that was in the EpiPen cost about 25 cents. So if you had a needle and a syringe, your cost is probably 50 cents. But somebody, through the power of government, made a regulation that all schools have to have EpiPens, and they have to change them out every year. And one guy has a patent for the EpiPen, and since he knows he's got a captive market, what does he do? He raises prices like crazy. So it was $500 for an EpiPen. That's what happens when the market isn't free. When we advocate for liberty, I want you to have as much liberty as you can have. I support your liberty. We're advocating for free markets. We're advocating for everything. And markets is one of the most demonstrable examples, because no matter who you're talking to, no matter where you are, here we are in this situation. I didn't know we were going to be talking about markets, but I'm able to pick up the fact that I got a mandarin orange in Northern Virginia in December as a great example of how the free market really, really works.
That was really good. In fact, it's so funny. You're making me remember a great libertarian joke from over the years.
I love libertarian jokes.
Well, I don't know if you've heard this particular one, but it's always a good one in my mind, because it crystallizes what you've said in a humorous way. How many libertarians does it take to change a light bulb?
How many libertarians does it take to change a light bulb?
None, because if it needed to have been changed, it would have been changed by the market a long time ago.
I like it.
And so that really does explain, in a simplistic way what you're describing, because that is the luxury of opening up creativity. And especially if it's and invariably it has to be altruistic, because no one's going to buy what you've got if they hate it or it hurts them. It's got to, like you said, I can't wait to get a screen of a TV that's the size of my whole friggin' wall over here. And whoever figures out how to get that down to the cheapest, they're going to steal everybody's business. But that doesn't mean they're going to retain it, because, it's like the guy that first saw the fax machine but didn't see the copier, which didn't see the computer. Just because you're kicking it today doesn't mean you're not going to get displaced tomorrow, and that's where the market's so great.
Yeah, and we love it when that happens.
Absolutely. Charles, I see you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Jeff, and fantastic presentation, Dan. I like that marketing pitch of how to get more audience supporting liberty. Reminds me of Leonard Reed's statement from the 60s, anything that's peaceful. But I think yours is a bit more direct. You have to use words that mean something to people. So a Republican who's libertarian might say, yeah, I want to support the LP, but like here in Virginia, Freitas is running. He's a big libertarian as a Republican. And the Democrat takeover of Virginia does threaten some bad laws and to our rights. So do you say go ahead and vote Republican when there's a libertarian running like a Rand Paul, but vote LP elsewhere when the Republican isn't very libertarian? Or how do you address that thing?
I definitely think that people should vote their conscience, and there's a lot of times where you can be presented with a situation where you don't like any of the candidates who are on there. So I can tell you that in the past in Massachusetts, I voted for candidates who were in favor of legalizing cannabis, even though they were Democrats, and I didn't agree with a lot of the other things they were doing. It helped that the Republican who was running against them was social conservative who wanted to repeal marriage equality in Massachusetts. So it was pretty easy to not vote for that guy. But you got to make a choice. In an ideal world, we're running libertarian candidates everywhere, but Libertopia hasn't happened yet. So I say choose what you want, but never, ever should a libertarian hesitate to run in any race, because you're not weakening a Republican in that process. So, my race, Massachusetts 6, you can look it up. It was a big deal, went national news. Rush Limbaugh called me out. Glenn Beck called me out, complained about the spoiler Dan Fishman who cost the Republican the election. But I can tell you that guy, every time that we talked, when we were in a debate, after I said something, he would say, you know what Dan said is right. Because I was arguing on the basic principles of liberty and markets. And he didn't talk that way. He was a Massachusetts Republican. This is a guy who, he was running as a Republican, but in Massachusetts, so many libertarians will remember my good friend, Carla Howell, inspirational candidate. Carla got a bill proposed in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, we can set law through public election. So we had a law that would repeal the state income tax. It was awesome. People really started to get behind it. And my Republican opponent, who at the time was the minority leader in the Senate, said, well, if the people pass that law, we're just going to ignore it. We're not going to honor it. I'm like, what? I mean, what kind of Republican are you? What kind of human being are you that you say we're going to ignore the will of the people? So there are liberty Republicans. There are liberty Democrats, right? We can say that we know a lot of Republicans, although it's an interesting question. I was going to say, I normally say we know a lot of Republicans who are pretty good on the Second Amendment. I'm not feeling that quite as much right now, just because of the people who are willing to say, oh, I think bump stocks should be illegal, or I support red flag laws because I think that the British would have said that Sam Adams was criminally insane and denied him and the Sons of Liberty all their guns because red flag. But let's say that there's some Republicans who we look at and we say, okay, they're good on these issues. There are Democrats that we look at, we're good on these issues. But fundamentally, what they agree upon and what we disagree with is a core principle. Republicans and Democrats believe that you can legislate morality, that government is the person who gets to decide what is morally right, and they believe that they can use force to make a morally just society. And we can never agree with that. I don't care who the Liberty Republican is, somewhere along the line, if they're willing to stomach all that stuff and be a Liberty Republican, or who the Liberty Democrat is, and they're willing to stomach all that other stuff and be a Liberty Democrat, there's still the fundamental issue of, do they support using force to correct society? And that's where we as libertarians differentiate ourselves. So there may be times that there are candidates that you have to vote for because, I don't want to say lesser of two evils, but you recognize the fact that there's not a libertarian running at this point in time. There's not somebody who is going to be able to stand up, because we don't have the capacity to run everywhere yet. But hopefully when that happens, that'll chap your hide and you'll be the libertarian who's running next time, because that makes a big difference. When we start doing that, when we start getting inspired, when we start to believe that we make a difference just by running. So I got a quick little story here. So I ran for city council in Beverly, Massachusetts. This is right after I ran for Congress. I wasn't planning on running for it, but Beverly only had 16 liquor licenses in the whole town, 40,000 people. There's a small private school in Beverly called Endicott. Some kids from Endicott came into town with really good fake IDs, bought booze, went back, trashed up the campus. The school police found the liquor bottles. They found the receipt. President of Endicott College complained to Beverly, said, gee, you're a trashy town. You have no good liquor laws. My kids came in there and were able to buy booze. So Beverly passed a law that said you cannot buy alcohol in Beverly without either a Massachusetts driver's license or a U.S. passport. And that's it. It's crazy, right? Law of unintended consequences. The next week, 4 weddings canceled in Beverly, because why would you have a wedding when your out-of-town friends aren't going to be able to drink while you're there? But the thing that got me involved in is a friend of mine who owned a restaurant called me up and said, Dan, I just had to turn away a soldier in uniform with his military ID and his Virginia driver's license because the law says I have to use Massachusetts or passport only. Can you help me? We can't complain, because if we complain, we're going to lose our liquor licenses, and there are only so many in the city. So I ran for city council on that one issue, and I talked about it all the time. I was never going to win a city council race. City council is about, did your kids play with my kids? Were you at the PTA bake sale? Did you coach soccer, etc.? We did none of those things. I had a really bad geographical break too. I lived right on the edge. But just in running for office and every public event I went to, I talked about this crazy liquor law. And when I spoke about it, it started to get picked up in the papers. Like, oh, and people didn't even know the reality because it didn't convince most people. Start to get picked up in the papers. People start talking about it. Other candidates start talking about, oh, you know what Fishman's saying is right. That liquor law really is wrong. We shouldn't be hurting Beverly businesses, etc. Before the election, they changed the law back. So sometimes just by running, you amplify your voice so much that you can have a greater impact than just being a citizen on the sideline. So I would say, yes, sometimes there are Liberty Republicans that you will vote for because there's not a better candidate. But when that happens, think about what's going to be involved in you making sure that there is a Libertarian candidate the next time around. And that's a critical thing.
Well, that was quite good. Let's take some other questions. Oop, looks like Charles is back. His hand's back up again.
Yeah, and everyone else in the call, click that raise hand symbol and get questions asked. Let's not let this webinar end, Dan, without you commenting on your presidential candidates. You got Bumper in the race now. You know, I had a hand in recruiting Gary as well as Weld, and had Mark Sanford on deck over the last cycles. Of course, Weld and Sanford have gone to the other side. But there's also, what's his name in Rhode Island, and
Lincoln Chafee.
Lincoln, and then there's other folks. You never know. What are your thoughts on that presidential race, or other big races statewide across the country?
Well, in terms of presidential races, I am, studiously neutral. It's the delegates' decision, and one of the great sacrifices that I had to make to take this job is accept the fact that I now work for the delegates, and it would be inappropriate for me to have a position on a presidential candidate before nomination. So the delegates then the members of the party get the best impartial work that I can give them. Building an engine, I like to say that the chair of the Libertarian Party is the head, and the LNC is the heart, and I am the legs. I make sure that when we know where we want to go, we can run fast and we can jump high and we can compete in that race. So when the delegates decide on a nominee, I am trying to make sure that we have a strong, active party that will be able to support them and do a great job. And not just there, across the country. We have candidates all throughout the places, all throughout the country, and campaigns throughout the country that I'm very excited about. I'm going to play my cards a little bit close to my vest because there are some places that I really think we're going to win, but I don't want to tip off the opposition that we're going to win some state races in some places. So let me just say that it's going to be a really good year for us. I'm excited about the candidates. I don't know who the presidential candidate will be. I don't even know if the presidential candidate is somebody who's declared now or if it's somebody who declared a year ago. What I do know is that the country is ripe for an honest candidate. I think that the reason why Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were so popular in 2016 is that they appeared to be honest. They said whatever was on their mind. They didn't couch their opinions. They didn't try to hide anything. But I think the electorate realizes now that neither Bernie Sanders nor Donald Trump are actually particularly honest. They just seemed honest. So now we're going to run candidates who really are honest, who are going to tell you everything about their position, because libertarians' position hasn't changed. I can tell you I have changed my opinion on one political thing since 1980. When I was a kid, I supported the death penalty. It made sense to me. Around 1986 or 1987, I started to realize there are so many cases of governments falsifying evidence to convict people that I cannot rightly support the death penalty. So that's me. That's the one position I've changed on. The party has been remarkably consistent. You can go back and look at our platform over the years, and we've enhanced it and we've been more clear about things. But we are the party of principle. Principles shouldn't change. We shouldn't be like the Republicans and the Democrats who, right, 2013, the Republicans are blocking all of Obama's nominees. And the Democrats say, you know what, we're going to get rid of the filibuster because we don't want you to block our nominees. And the Republicans say, guys, the filibuster is critical to our country. The idea that there will not be a tyranny of majority is enshrined in the right of the filibuster. If you take that away from us, the most sacred thing, you are committing a crime against America. And the Democrats are like, yeah, whatever. We're getting rid of the filibuster so that we can get all our judges through. But we're going to leave it in place for the Supreme Court because we don't have any Supreme Court nominees. So 2017, right? The Republicans are nominating Gorsuch, I think was first. They're nominating Gorsuch, and they don't have the votes because the Democrats are going to filibuster. The Republicans say, you know what? We're going to get rid of the filibuster. And the Democrats say, no, no, no. It's critical to American democracy. The filibuster is important. Please don't do it. The exact opposite. 4 years ago, it wasn't critical or anything like that. It was just about power. And so the people see the old parties flip-flopped, right? 2013, Democrats want to invade Syria. Republicans say, no, 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 no. 2017, the Republicans invade Syria. Democrats, no, 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 no. Complete flip-flop. It has nothing to do what we are, right? We are countries now of position and opposition. And whatever the Republicans say they're going to do, the Democrats are going to be the opposite. And when the Republicans move like this, the Democrats pivot like that. I'm trying to do my hands right on the camera. It's very complicated. But that's exactly where we are. We're in position and opposition, as opposed to libertarians, who we don't pivot. We have a stake in the ground, a line in the sand. These are your personal liberties, and we will not violate them. And that's something that I think is appealing across the board.
That was a perfect way to end things today, because actually we reached the end of our time frame here, sadly. That was great. But it will be exciting to see what does happen. And it's time for somebody that really is staking out the reality of the world and is trying to be frank and honest and be truthful. Because, you know, what I've seen is the large difference is that, you know, outside of Trump, for the most part, the bulk of the people running in those other parties are doing it as a career. The bulk of the people I've ever seen in the Libertarian Party come from private business and just kind of get miffed in the end like you did and say, this is ridiculous, I'm going to run for office. And then they suddenly catch the bug, and, you know, because they are able to move the, like you said, move the needle just by running alone, I've made things happen. Well, heck, if that's all it took, I can run again and so on. Now it's just going to take an army of consumers out there, consumers who decide to be a candidate as the little business offering that they're going to pro offer everybody. So it was great to have you today, and I'm excited to see what the coming months will bring. So welcome to the task. It looks like we've got somebody that can really rise to it. So thanks so much, Dan.
Thank you, Jeff.